From August 15th to the 18th, 1969, the stars aligned. This was the last summer of a turbulent decade of protests, war, and assassinations. That summer, over 450,000 people attended a rock festival on these fields, billed as a festival of peace and love. The establishment called them hippies. These are their stories.
There were people who were like, oh, you're just a hippie, get a job. And I had a job, so it was, certainly highlighted some of the differences in people's attitudes and opinions. So yeah, I was considered the long-haired hippie, commie, pinko freak.
And how we wound up going to Woodstock. I was a deputy in the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office at the time, and the sheriff, Larry Quinlan, was requested under mutual aid to send some people, and so I wound up going, and I've been forever grateful that I had a chance to be there. It was a very, very positive experience. I mean, it was busy, it was tiring, it was muddy, it was exhilarating, it was everything all at once. But, I had some stereotypes about hippies, I guess we can use that term, and, but I was a young guy. I was 24 years old. I was the same age as many of the kids that were there, the hippies. And I learned that the stereotypes I had were not accurate. The people that we met there were so cooperative and so kind and so generous. And quite candidly, if the people at Woodstock had not been as supportive as they were, if the kids hadn't been as cooperative, it would have been a very different outcome. It was a relatively nonviolent environment, and I guess there weren't many cops there. I guess the cops that were there deserve some of the credit, but quite candidly, I give the greater amount of credit for keeping things relatively calm. I give that the lion's share of that credit to the kids themselves, the hippies.
Some people say Woodstock was the defining moment of the 1960s. Some say it was the end of an era.
To me, Woodstock was a big part of the anti-war movement and a big part of the civil rights movement and a big part of who we were as young people and the consciousness of the time.
Back then, people talked. People sat down and talked. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't text. We had a party line of 10 people, our telephone line in Pennsylvania. Now, if you go into a restaurant and you look around today, and you look at a family, like I just experienced this, like last week. I was in a restaurant, I just by myself, just sitting there, and I look around, mom, a dad, and 3 so-called teenagers, maybe one a little younger. All of them were on their cell phone. No conversation, no interaction. And back then there wasn't that. Everybody interacted. I think that's why people at Woodstock got along. They interacted, they were happy, they were glad to be there. They had music, they had fun. Yes, they had drugs. But people nowadays, they don't communicate.
Woodstock took place in Bethel, New York, on a farm owned by Max Yasgur.
Michael Lang, one of the 4 Woodstock Ventures partners, had this idea to build a recording studio up in Woodstock so that he could give a place for Bob Dylan and Richie Havens and Van Morrison, a place to record. That's where they were living at the time because Woodstock had been a bohemian community, an artist colony for over a century. He had this idea to build a recording studio, and he and his partner, Artie Kornfeld, thought that they would host a concert to raise money for this So by that time they had financial partners who didn't want to do a recording studio at all, but that idea of the rock festival really caught their attention. They found a place near Middletown, the town of Wallkill, and they paid the rental money for the property, started advertising the festival, started booking the bands. They sold 100,000 tickets. They had told the people in Wallkill, the zoning board, that there was going to be 50,000 people for a folk festival, and they'd already sold 100,000 tickets and already booked Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. It was hardly a folk festival.
The locals found out about the immensity of the festival, and fearing pandemonium, the town of Wallkill pulled the organizers' license and permits. Having only 4 weeks to prepare, Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld hurriedly made a deal with local farmer Max Yasger to hold the festival at his hayfield in Bethel, New York.
Getting there was a drive down the thruway until we got off, and then you could start seeing the accumulation of cars. And it's hard to put this into words that people would understand now, but there was definitely a vibe the closer you got. We finally drove as far as we possibly could, pulled over to the side of the road, parked the car, and joined the procession in going down to Max Yasger's farm. And lo and behold, it became the second largest city in New York State. So there were people who were dancing and clapping and singing along, and I think the phrase was at the time, it was a happening. So we were part of that. And I think at the time we were fully cognizant that we were part of the event. It felt like we were making history.
Barbara Ferrara Adams, then age 19, went to Woodstock with her boyfriend Gary, her cousin, and a few friends on a Thursday, thinking it would be another typical concert. Her parents allowed them to go. Their only worry is where they would spend the weekend. Little did they know that they would spend that rainy, wet weekend in the wide open air.
We had clothes and tent equipment and everything, but we left them in the car because we were walking in. So we just had the clothes on our back. We built a lean-to in the woods, and of course in the storm that just blew down, and we were soaking wet and muddy and everything, and we knew we had nice clean clothes back in the car. We didn't have anywhere to change them. But we walked back, and as we walked back, there were like some people opened their houses. They put like hoses outside so we could get drinks. I remember somebody, vaguely in my mind, I could see somebody letting us in their kitchen and giving us an actual glass of water and something to eat, like a piece of fruit. And then we just kept walking till we found the car, and we found our clothes, and we all kind of took turns changing in the car and left our wet clothes in the car, and then changed into another set. That was on Saturday.
Oh yeah, I loved the music. That was what it was all about, was the music and spirituality of the yogi and so forth. And I'm very much into Vedic meditation and lifestyle. I live that lifestyle now. Up in Ellenville there's a lot of Maharishi and so forth. They had an ashram up there. So, and then there's ashrams all around through Monticello, up in Ellenville and that area up in there, Sullivan County. There's quite a few different ashrams. So I used to study that and practice it, and live the love and peace perspective from their approach too. Not just the '60s approach, but from the perspective of spirituality with the Vedic approach to life and philosophy. Back then, it was very prevalent. Back in the '60s, too, were in the college days. I was studying it in college, and you know, was very prevalent in college. You know, we just drove right up to the back where you can, let's see, that's Hurd and West Shore Road. We came right up through there, and bingo, here we are.
When they opened the festival, they had um, kind of a Hare Krishna type person. I forget the fellow, Maharishi something. I forget the guy's name. But anyhow, he tried to get everybody to say Om, okay, at once to, you know, to stop, to hold back the rain, to, you know. And a good percentage of the people did it where you could hear the echo of the sound to the valley, you know, but the rain came anyhow.
I was in high school, actually, senior year, and my next door cousin came to me and said, there's this concert that every band that's today is going to be attending called Woodstock, and it's an outdoor music festival. She wanted to go, but her father said she couldn't. My father, when I said I wanted to go, said, no, you cannot. We're first generation born here in America. My father was born and came from Sicily, Italy, and didn't have any respect for the change of young people, as most of the older establishment generation, as we called them then. And I said to him, Dad, we're in America. I'm 18 years old. I don't need your permission. Well, that went like a bomb.
In defiance, Anthony Leo went anyway, packing up an old Dodge and going to Woodstock with friends.
So you pulled over on the side of the road, and that's where the car stayed for 4 days. And then we walked through the field, and I kept saying, where do you go to give your ticket? Where's the entrance gate? And the guy standing right there laughing and blah blah blah, and you could see this enormous stage. Oh, it's the biggest stage I ever saw. And he says, you're standing on the fence. They had beaten the chain link fence into the ground, so many people trampling over it. So at that point, there was no entrance. They were entering from everywhere. There was no order of entrance. It was just people congregating and coming in by the thousands.
If you look at the overhead pictures of that crowd, if you decide you want to go to the bathroom, you have to pick out markers to get back to where you were. I mean, that's pretty difficult. Trying to find your way back to your friends.
Desiree Shores grew up in Souderton, Pennsylvania. She grew to love show business, dance, and music, her mother being a former rockette. In 1969, Shores, then 16 years old, traveled to the Woodstock Festival with two older friends who nearly abandoned her.
So we found a place. We were really up front, and but then those two decided they were going to go back to sleep, and I said, no way am I leaving here because I want to see everybody. And so I just stayed there. And then when I finally went back to where we were camped, well, everybody was gone. I had, at that time then, I had none of my stuff left. I only had the sweater that I had, my ticket in my pocket, and I didn't have anything. Everything that I had brought to the campground was gone. Everything. But you know what? I still have. I knitted this halter top to wear at Woodstock. I don't have any pictures though. I never could afford a camera. But I still have that little top, and I still have the jacket my brother bought me at Army Navy for $1. I still have it. My brother bought me that jacket for $1, Army Navy, because he couldn't go because he had to work. And then he was killed when he was 26 in a car accident in Pennsylvania. And I can never give up that jacket.
There were airdrops for food and water because no vehicles could come in and out. Helicopters bringing rock groups in. They did have some openings for ambulances, but they also set up hospitals. It became a city of tents and debris. We turned into shelters. Horrible, horrible rainstorms, lightning, thunder, huge stage full of electronics. Nobody cares. Everybody was smoking pot. Everybody was doing the drug of the day back then.
Is the Who got up to play. And Peter Townsend's playing the bass. He's over on the stage left. And they're just kind of like tuning up their instruments. And this guy jumps up on stage. He's so far enough away I can see it's a guy, but I can't see his face. Anyways, turns out that's A.B. Hoffman. So he's walking over there, he grabs the mic, and I don't know whether he was drunk or high or whatever, but he's telling everybody that after the thing we all got to march up to Alaska and get this guy out of jail, because he got thrown in jail for having one joint. So he's going on, and Peter Townsend walks up in back of him, and he hits him in the back of the head with a bass guitar and knocks him right off the stage.
I remember almost all the events, like really, I can remember we were still in the woods putting our lean-to together when Canned Heat came on. So now every time I hear that going out to the country, every time I hear that now, I could see us building our lean-to in the woods. I can remember Janis Joplin. We got closer to the stage because I absolutely loved her, and so we got really close to the stage. Country Joe McDonald, I can remember we never stayed in one spot. We would get up and like go try to find some food, go swimming, walk around. There wasn't a lot of space to walk around. I mean, you had to move out of the festival because really watching the music, you were like literally like this,
The 60s was a time of tremendous change in clothing, in music, in politics, in where we lived and how we lived. Everything changed in the 60s. It became a youth culture, a youth-oriented culture for the first time ever. And Woodstock became a symbol of that. Was it the biggest rock festival that's ever happened? No, there's been several that are much bigger. Was it unique that summer? No, there were 24 other festivals, one in Atlantic City, and so what made Woodstock special was the fact that a whole generation, because of the movie, the soundtrack, and the way the attendees rose up to the occasion and didn't let all the crap that happened affect their enjoyment of the festival and didn't turn into riots. All of those things made Woodstock a symbol for a generation that had idealism about wanting to change the world.
There's a lot to be said in the statement, live in the moment. I lived that moment, and my passion about living that moment is that I can always go back to it in my mind and in my thoughts. And I know to date it was a good thing.
A lot of the music we play is just that fun, upbeat music that actually is music. So. But then a lot of our original album is influenced by all these bands from the 60s and 70s. when I really learned about Woodstock, it was during History of Rock and Roll. That was a class taught at our school, and we got to watch old videos of like Joe Crocker singing, you know,
You Are So Beautiful?
No.
What would you do if I sang out of tune?
Yeah, I learned a lot about it there.
Yeah, get by with a little help from my friends. Because I think, you know, back then obviously music was extremely different than it is now. So many different directions from that point on until now. So
I don't think there will be another music event as big as Woodstock, but I think the idea of Woodstock still lives on.